course, Bruce is a fantastic goalkeeper, but of course he can play out. And of course, in the early 80s, they called him a clown because he kept dribbling out and he was good with his feet, which is what people want from their goalkeepers now. Mm-hmm. So from a goalkeeping perspective, I went for Bruce in goal as one of my players I played with.
Fabulous career at Liverpool, 13 trophies in 13 years, I think it was. How good a goalkeeper was Bruce? Was it his agility that made him so effective in goal for the team you played in?
Absolutely. But of course, people talk about the mistakes that he made in terms of coming for crosses. But of course, the amount of goals he saved by doing that, it's always easy to highlight the goalkeeper's mistakes. But Bruce was a fantastic shot stopper, great on crosses. And of course, as I said, in modern day football, he's probably the most sought after goalkeeper. Because of course, when I first went to Liverpool, all we did was play five-a-sides. On a Friday, we'd have some shooting practice, but we didn't do any shooting practice. So Bruce had to play out every single day. And I'm not going to embarrass anybody by telling you who the last pick was, but it wasn't Bruce. In the five-a-side, and we're only playing outfield, no goalkeepers. Bruce wasn't the last pick.
To your defence, then, we'll start with your fullbacks. The first one is the interesting one. Manuel Amoros is a guy who had league success in France with 2 teams, part of the very successful French side in 1984. Why is he in?
He's a great defender. I mean, they played against him in 1984, just before the Euros where France won it. And he was just so strong, so good defensively, good on the ball. I've only played against him once, but I've never come up against a defender so strong. And in 1984, I'd already, been playing for England for, over a year. And I was doing well at Watford. And, it's an out-and-out wing. And I always felt good playing against continental players because while they were good on the ball, defensively, they weren't that great. But he was a strong defender, good on the ball. You just couldn't get past him. Strong, good in the air. Just the perfect right back. Chris Waddle, who played in France, and he said he was difficult to get past. So it's not just me, but of course because he's not a sexy name, if you like a Platini from France or, Zinedine Zidane. But you speak to any professional footballer who would have played with or against him, and they say he was one of the best they played with.
Let's talk about your other fullback then. Who's on the opposite side of the field?
Stephen Nicol. Played left back in front of me for a couple of years, but he also went to right back, centre back, midfield. And when you talk about a Mr. Dependable, you can play anywhere. But that year, my first year when he played left back behind me, he was just incredible. Good defender, good coming forward. He's right-footed, but great attacking player as well. He would get down the line, put crosses in, defend on the far post, would play centre back, similar to Manuel Amoros in that respect. Comfortable on the ball, but as he's played in midfield, and I remember we scoring a hat-trick against Newcastle from a full-back position. He was also a very, very strong defender. And what it's easy to do is when you're picking defenders or picking a team, you think of everybody who's good on the ball. And they're great attacking fullbacks. But you have to think about a team who can actually win a game. And therefore, you need defenders in the team as well. So, Stephen Nicol, Amoros, they're both good coming forward, but they're also good defensively.
In terms of one of his great strengths, it was his versatility. Was he as versatile a player as you came across in your career? Because you reeled off some of the positions he played in, and he played in nearly every position on the park at one stage.
Yeah, similar to Ronnie Whelan. Both came through at the same time. Ronnie could play fullback. He's actually played centre-back before, midfield, wide, off the striker. So I don't know whether they both came to Liverpool at the same time, whether that's a Liverpool trait when you come to Liverpool. But as much as he can play in any position, he can play well in any position. So fullback was his best position. So, I would have Nico in any team.
To your centre-halves now. One of them is another former Liverpool player. Tell us who you've selected to line up at the back.
Well, Alan Hansen. Get him in any world team, anytime, any era. So far ahead of his time. Very much like Virgil van Dijk. If you speak to me now about, Liverpool centre-backs, in my opinion, ever, Hansen, Van Dijk. As much as Van Dijk's been there for 2 years, hopefully he'll be there for longer to really cement his position. But in terms of what he's done, and Alan could play now. In fact, Alan wasn't necessarily the strongest centre-back in terms of getting a broken nose and being physical with a big centre-forward, which he had to be when playing against Mick Harford, John Fashanu, centre-forwards in the old days. But he was clever enough to be able to handle them. But more importantly, his ability on the ball, particularly at that time when football was just about defending if you're a centre-back, but his ability on the ball to start Liverpool's counter-attacks. And the majority of the passes I got in good areas were from Alan Hansen bringing the ball out, started all our attacks. And I've gone on record as saying, as much as one of the big reasons for Liverpool, and I won't say Liverpool's demise, but Liverpool not being right at the top when Kenny left. And, of course, that was a big reason, Kenny Dalglish leaving. I think Alan Hansen retiring also had a big part to do with that because he was so influential in terms of the way we played. He wasn't a shouter and he led by example in terms of the way he played, but he wasn't a screamer and a baller, and he didn't lead like Graham Souness would lead or, my other centre-back who I picked alongside him. But in terms of him just being the most influential player in Liverpool, for me, Alan Hansen definitely, would be that one.
In terms of his style of play, you mentioned he was different to perhaps most of the centre-halves that played back then. kind of underlines how good he really was. To be able to play the way he did at that time, you had to be a special player, didn't you? To be that good on the ball and to be such an elegant defender at a time when, as you say, defenders were more about kind of being tough, being rugged.
But you had to have the right club for you. Now, he couldn't have gone and played for Wimbledon or Manchester United or any other team, because the way Liverpool played was a very technical game, which is why they won the European Cup so many times in the 70s. Because English football back in the 70s and early 80s, up to the mid-80s, was not about what Alan Hansen did. It was about physical aggression and tenacity. But Liverpool suited him because Liverpool were a very technical team who brought the ball out from the back, which is what he did. So, which is why he probably never played as well for Scotland as he did for Liverpool, which is similar to me in England. But in terms of the way that I believe football should be played and is being played now, Alan Hansen playing now would be incredible. Because, of course, playing now, you don't come up against big centre forwards who are going to elbow you in the nose and break your nose and be that overly physical, which Alan coped with and played at that time. And also, he's such a good defender because, of course, you just couldn't get past him. And he would intercept the ball rather than tackling. Remember Mark Lawrence's tackles? But Alan Hansen was so intelligent that he didn't have to slide tackle. He just read the game so well. You know, he intercepted, brought the ball out, which is what you do now. And in fact, now if he was playing, he would still be he'd be even more influential now, because that is the way you play football now all the way through modern football. So I'd have Alan in any world team at any era, anytime.
Your other centre-half, one of the legendary names of football, over 700 appearances for AC Milan. Who have you gone for?
Franco Baresi, you know, the Italian captain. You speak to Ray Wilkins. God rest his soul, Ray's not with us anymore. But Ray used to say about what a great defender, great leader, great inspiration in training, in the way he lived his life, his professionalism. He would be the captain in this team because he drives people on physically, verbally, and alongside Alan, that would be an incredible defensive line. He wasn't particularly big, but he was good in the air. He was quick. His interceptions, good on the ball. Alan's probably better on the ball than Baresi. But when you talk about somebody alongside who's a real leader and a real will to stop you losing, you know, Baresi, you know, is just second to none. I think what you have to do is you have to look at the consistency shown over a period of time. If you're going to make a world 11, you know, because you've had players who came on the scene, like Toto Schillaci, for example. I don't know if you remember him for Italy when they walked to the World Cup. He was a top scorer in 1990. I don't think he played much before and much after. So, you know, you have players who've come for one or two seasons and done fantastically well. But all of the players here have to have that consistency over a period of time. And of course, if you look at all of the ones here, Baresi and Hansen particularly, you know, that's what they've proven.
That sort of back five you've picked, great level of success, great experience, but also perform for the big clubs, the big stage. So that tells you about the kind of mental strength, their ability to deal with being at the top level. That's a great asset to have in any side as well.
Absolutely. But more importantly for me, the defensive capabilities. Because, of course, you can go for a great attacking team and have, you know, fullbacks who attack and score goals, but then you're going to concede goals. And a team, for me, has to be a team when the chips are down, you're not going to concede and you can get results. And this team can do that. I could pick a more attacking team who, when everything is going well, they could win 5-0 every week. But then in the semi-final or quarterfinals, when they're not playing well, they may have a soft center, if you like. Whereas this team, as much as they're great players, you have to look at their mentality and the characteristics that they have psychologically as well to be winners.
Fascinating stuff. That is John's goalkeeper and defence sorted. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll get the midfield and the attack for his ultimate 11. Back soon. Welcome back to this edition of Ultimate 11. Our guest this time round is the one and only John Barnes. We've already heard his goalkeeper and defence for his side. Who's he picked in midfield and up top? Let's get to midfield then. One man you've picked is a guy you played alongside for England, a former Manchester United captain. Who is he?
Brian Robson, Captain Marvel. Incredible footballer, can do anything. Plays a holding midfield player, an attacking midfield player, player centre-back, once again his versatility. But of course, you know, as a midfield player, particularly in the team I'm picking, you will need somebody who is able to, what they talk about, box-to-box midfield players. It's quite an attacking team when you hear the rest. So I need someone who would be able to just sit and defend, but also be good on the ball, be able to pass to the front four, if you like. As much as you say it's a 4-4-2, it's more of a 4-2-4 with the other attacking players. But Robson can do everything. Great on the ball, good tackling. As I said, he can't get the ball from him. You can't dribble past him. I mean, he was just, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best modern English players. I think Glenn Hoddle technically was the best English player I've played with. But when you talk about modern football, which is not just about technique, if you're going to play in midfield, it's also about tackling and winning the ball, particularly in a team that's going to be very attacking. Similar to, I suppose, our midfield, whereby with the front three and our attacking fullbacks, you'll need midfield players who can get forward and also get back and defend. And Robson could do that. So Robson could play in Jurgen Klopp's midfield now with no shadow of a doubt.
Hampered by injuries at some spells during his career, but he's still got, I think, like 90 or so England caps. How strong was his just desire and his will to compete? Because that's sometimes the unquantifiable thing in footballers.
I mean, his mentality was incredible. He had 2 broken legs when he was young. He didn't break his legs later on, and he had his injuries later on, but he just came back from it because he was single-minded. He had the right determination. He was just incredible.
Brian Robson brings some steel and some quality to midfield. The man alongside him brings both those things as well. It's a former Liverpool captain. Who is it this time round?
Well, it's Souness. Graham. I mean, Steven Gerrard is my favourite all-time Liverpool player, and I think that Steven Gerrard, had I played with him or against him, he would have been in this team, but I didn't. So Souness is there because Souness is very much like Brian Robson. Probably not as dynamic in Brian Robson in terms of getting up and down, but he was strong, good defensively. You couldn't get past him. Great on the ball, great vision, great skill. And as I said, you'd need 2 players like that in midfield with the other 4 players I have left who would be very disciplined, but as well as getting forward and scoring important goals and being really single-minded, tough mentally. Those 2 in midfield, I think, would be able to compete with anyone.
Moving through the rest of your team, your next player was a guy who was so instrumental in that Liverpool side that you were in, well, especially in sort of 87, 88, that attacking trio you had up top. Another former England colleague as well. Who is he?
Peter Beardsley. You know, alongside Alan Hansen, he's my favourite Liverpool player to play with. Peter was a selfless player. Peter would rather you score a goal than he score a goal. He'd rather chase back and tackle in midfield for the midfield player to score a goal. He'd rather go and help the fullback out. When you talk about a team player who wants to play for the team, it's Peter Beardsley. And I was just going through, obviously with not a lot to do, going through on my phone, people keep sending me Liverpool games of the past. And when you talk about Peter Beardsley being involved in everything, you know, in terms of creativity, in terms of working hard. I was just watching Nottingham Forest 5-0 game, it's my favourite game of all time. And Peter was the man of the match. It was just an incredible performance. And every time Peter played for Liverpool, it's a shame he didn't stay longer. And people don't really realise he didn't play for Liverpool for that long. He was there for 3 years because he's had such an influence. But when you talk about a player who's just selfless for the team, and as much as I said, Souness and Robson in midfield, and you know it's going to be hard for them because they're a very attacking team. It wouldn't be that hard because Peter Beardsley would be alongside them, tracking back, making tackles, working hard for the team, as well as getting forward and creating for the front players. So, you know, I can't speak highly enough of Peter. And he was also my roommate. Played with him for England before we came to Liverpool. Great guy. And as a footballer, he was the closest thing to Kenny Dalglish.
I was going to say, fabulous player. As you say, it was quite a short, sharp burst of time at Liverpool. He wasn't there that long, just a few seasons, but very successful and very effective in the time he was there. From a personal point of view, was he someone you would have liked to have been around longer, to have played with longer at a club level?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was watching it again, and I thought then, of course, when 91, 92, 93 came around and Peter wasn't there anymore, and things had changed. But I think if Peter Beardsley had stayed, we still would have, of course, things changed. But I think that, you know, he still had obviously a few good years left in him. And as I said, my favourite player to play with for Liverpool was Peter Beardsley.
The next player in your side is the player that falls into the something else category, someone you didn't play with, didn't play against. It's someone who's currently still playing. He's playing his trade over at Barcelona. Tell us who he is, John.
Well, I think you answered the question there yourself when he said playing at Barcelona. It's Lionel Messi. Greatest player, modern player in the last 10 years, 15, 20 years, in my opinion, alongside Ronaldo, but I put him ahead of Ronaldo. A real team player, humble, which is important. As much as he's the superstar of Barcelona, he still has respect for the Catalan culture, his teammates, the club, the fans. Humility for me is the greatest quality any human being can have. And as much as himself and Ronaldo, you can't necessarily separate them in terms of their ability. In terms of character, I just prefer, I don't know either of them, but I prefer the way that Lionel Messi comes across. And that's a footballer who can, you know, do everything from an attacking perspective. Yes, we lost Leo to get back and maybe do a bit of defending, but with Robson and Souness and Beardsley doing that, you know, Messi will just be able to go and do what he does. So he's the one who, as much as there are great players like Pele, for example, who I would class equally as brilliant as Messi, but because of obviously having to fit the team in around players I played with and against, he's the only one who I didn't play with, and I could fit him into this position because from a striking perspective, players I didn't play with, I could pick 5, 6, or 7, or 8, or played against. But because I wanted to make the team something that could actually play on a football field together, I put him ahead of, you know, other great players of the past.
Fabulous footballer. The next man in your side is something slightly similar, another Argentinian superstar, a man you played against. Who is it?
Well, this is my favourite player of all time, Diego Maradona. he was incredible. In 1986, just to watch him and to be on the same pitch as him was unbelievable. He was very Messi-like, but in a time when people were trying to break your leg and trying to hurt you, and you had to watch out for tackles, he actually overcame that at a time when you talk about physicality being a real part of the game in the early to mid 80s, whereby somebody pushes you, you're not falling over and getting a free kick. Somebody kicks you, you're not getting a free kick and yellow cards and red cards. Hardest thing about playing back then is when the ball's coming to you, A, it's bobbly because the pitches are terrible, you're playing in mud. And secondly, you had to have one eye on the player who's coming to try and break your leg. Now, on the pitches they play on now, even with Messi, you haven't got to worry about controlling the ball because the pitches are perfect. You haven't got to worry about anyone kicking you because they're not going to. They don't tackle anymore. So what Maradona actually did, although that is not for a short space of time, I can tell you, because I first saw him as a 19-year-old at Wembley in 1981 when England beat Argentina 3-1. And he was one of his early games. He might have been 18 or 19. And I was at that game as a young boy just coming from Jamaica. And I'd never seen anything like it. Never seen anything like it from 1981, 82. So then up until 1986, 87, up until 1990, ups and downs, we know his lifestyle. So therefore, he may not have been as consistent as people would have liked. But that 86 World Cup, I've never seen a player influence single-handedly a team, which was a good Argentina team. And what he could actually do with a ball was just, incredible. So for me, any World 11 at any time, yes, you could argue Baresi, Hansen, Nichols, Souness, Robson, not so much Messi, but I don't think anybody could ever argue about Maradona being, one of the all-time greats. You
mentioned that World Cup in 86. You mentioned that game. You came on in that game to great effect. You got a ringside seat for his 2 goals prior to that. I just wonder what your emotions were watching the 2 very different goals.
Well, the first goal we saw straight away. I've got no issue with him. I remember Paul Scholes, I think Michael Owen, Gary Lineker definitely handball to try and score a goal and he didn't get away with it. My gripe and everybody's gripe should be with the referee for not seeing it. So this whole idea of he cheated. Listen, players have done things, died for penalties, whatever. So I didn't have an issue with that. The referee should have seen it. So that's that one. But the second goal was just unbelievable. He scored a better goal against Belgium in the semi-final. I don't know if you remember it, when he went past Gerrits, who's one of the greatest defenders, went past 3 or 4 of them. But that goal, when he picked the ball up at the halfway line and he just glided past all the players, and such a big game like that. And of course, with what they would call Malvinas, we call the Falklands, it was heightened the whole game and the rivalry. But to do that at that stage and to keep a cool head to take the ball around the goalkeeper, throughout the whole game. And in this final, when they beat Germany, he was still the man of the match, played the ball through for the winning goal. That was really his World Cup. So, that World Cup was a World Cup where I don't think I've seen one player dominate and been so influential in winning a World Cup than 86. And I've followed the World Cup from the 50s all the way through.
Yeah, fabulous player. He did guide and drive his nation to victory in the end. Okay, the final player in your ultimate 11, John, then is a player who's a 3-time Ballon d'Or winner, a star for the Netherlands and a star again for that great Milan side. Who is it? Who's your final player?
Marco van Basten. He was just an incredible centre forward. Obviously, with his injuries, he had to retire early. But I remember 1988 in the European Championship when he was injured. And of course, player politics always played a big part in Dutch football since Johan Cruyff in the 70s. And they had a player who scored 2 goals against England a few months earlier called Johnny Bosman, who went to the European Championships in 88 and we thought was going to play. But the players wanted Van Basten, who had been injured all year. And because of player power, he got in the team. And everyone thought, okay, well, he's not been fit. He's going to get in the team. Scored a hat-trick against England, top scorer. You saw the goal he scored against Russia in the final. And he was incredible centre forward. You've got Messi, you've got Maradona, who are absolutely unbelievable players. But when you talk about a complete player who is 6'3", good in the air, quick, skillful, he could do everything as a centre forward. Because obviously Messi and Maradona aren't going to score many headers. Physically, they're not going to be. Yes, Maradona is strong physically, but he's not a great big centre forward who's going to fight with his back to goal against centre halves. But what he did to Tony Adams, and I think it was Terry Butcher in the which are 2 strong defenders. He's quick, great in the air, good in the box. When you talk about balls coming in the 6-yard box, a John Aldridge type scorer, you don't expect a 6'3" centre forward to be good at that. He's supposed to be good in the air, but he could just do everything. Works hard as well. He can hold the ball up to bring others into play. When you talk about Maradona and Messi behind him, you need a centre forward to get hold of the ball and bring them into play, complement each other. There's not another centre forward who could put ahead of him. Rushy, great goal scorer. Don't get me wrong. Gary Lineker, other goal scorers. But in terms of an all-round player to play in a team when, if you have to go back to front with a long ball to play up to centre forward's chest to get hold of the ball and bring people into play, Van Basten.
I love how much detail and thought you put into how the players would link up as well. It's a fabulous side. Let's run through it then, just to recap it for everyone watching. In goal is, of course, your former Liverpool teammate Bruce Grobbelaar. Manuel Amaros will play as one full-back. Steve Nicol on the other side, with Alan Hansen and Franco Baresi as the two centre-halves. In midfield, Brian Robson and Graham Souness are the steel. There's Peter Beardsley to work and pull the strings. And you've got Lionel Messi, Diego Maradona and Marco van Basten. That's a pretty impressive attacking front three, we call them that. John Barnes, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. That is your Ultimate 11. We'll do it again another time. Thank you.